So many of us who are concerned about the Republican Party's slide towards authoritarianism are called hysterical by others. They say, can't happen in America, because after all, we've got a free press, right? Well, the Republicans have a plan to address that too. Let's talk about that in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post something new. So one thing that showed America's resiliency during the Trump years was the ability of the free press to report on what the administration was doing, despite the administration's best efforts to stop it. I mean, who can forget when the Trump White House threw CNN's Jim Acosta out of the press room? It didn't take long for him to be returned based upon the incredibly bad press that resulted from this action. In fact, the continual reporting on the outrages and incompetence of the Trump administration is one of the big reasons why Donald Trump and his supporters have made such a point of attacking the biased press as being fake news. This kind of rhetoric has reached deep into the Republican Party, with even a judge writing in an opinion, if you can believe it, that the New York Times and the Washington Post are nothing more than voices for the Democratic Party. Well, I think that would be a big surprise to many of us, including myself, by the way, who get frustrated sometimes with the coverage that the press does give to the Democrats. The point is, though, that free press doesn't favor anyone in particular. They try to report the truth. Now, do they get that wrong? Of course they do. They're people. People make mistakes. And you can see how legitimate media deals with their mistakes by withdrawing it and issuing corrections to make it clear that they've made a mistake and that they want to set the record straight. Ironically, when media does that, that type of thing is seized upon by Republicans who then claim, oh, look, it just shows that the press is unreliable. No, I mean, it actually shows the press is reliable, that they're willing to correct their mistakes, that they know mistakes get made by people, and that they're willing to go out on a limb and correct them. Granted, there's certainly a segment of the population that buys the rhetoric coming out of the Republican Party that the media is ridiculously biased. But it turns out actually that that's a relatively narrow sliver of population. Granted, you've got One America News Network and you've got Fox News constantly attacking the other media, claiming that they're fair and balanced, as Fox News claims. But the reality is that the vast majority of people out there understand that the media, imperfect as it may be, does try to report the facts. And in general, they will rely more upon the mainstream media to get their facts than upon such biased sources as Fox News or OAN. So this attack by the Republicans on the legitimacy of the media has been destructive. But truth be told, it's not been that effective. Well, now it turns out that the MAGA crowd have another weapon in their arsenal that they're about to unleash upon the media, and that has to do with the courts. Dating back to the 1960s, the most important precedent regarding freedom of the press is a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court that's called New York Times v. Sullivan. That 1964 case was in response to a libel case filed by a white supremacist public official in Alabama against the New York Times. Apparently, he didn't like some of the coverage that the New York Times was giving of his efforts to oppress black people in his state. Well, he won a $500,000 verdict against the New York Times, which was a substantial amount of money back then. That verdict was upheld, by the way, by the Alabama Supreme Court. However, the U.S. Supreme Court took it up, and in a unanimous opinion, they reversed the decision and held that the only way that public officials would be able to win in libel cases is if the newspaper or other media source engaged in actual malice in their reporting. Well, actual malice essentially says that the newspaper or the reporters were trying to hurt the individual rather than actually report on the facts. That at the time they were reporting the facts, they have to know that they were untrue, or they have to report them with such reckless disregard for the truth that they should have known they were untrue. Well, that decision has since been broadened to essentially protect the media whenever they're reporting on anybody deemed to be a public figure. And ironically, even before Donald Trump ran for president, he was stopped in a libel action against somebody by that same standard, where he was deemed to be a public figure, and so reporting that he claimed was untruthful was protected. This standard that was set in New York Times v. Sullivan is really unique to the United States, and it's quite a contrast with the British system, where in Britain, essentially, reporters have to prove that their facts are true, whereas based upon the New York Times case, in the United States, it's the plaintiffs, the people who are claiming that there was libel, who have to prove that the statements were both untruthful and that they were made with actual malice. It's a very high standard to overcome. The result has been that books and articles have been published in the United States that might not have been published in Britain, where publishers were afraid of potential lawsuits, even though they believed that the information that was reporting was accurate. That fear really doesn't exist in the United States. Now you have to understand, I have actually worked as a press secretary for a public official. I've worked in dozens of campaigns over my career. And I can tell you, I've had more than my share of frustration with reporters who are reporting things that I felt was untruthful or at least failed to capture the context that I thought was relevant. But I can also say that I have never, ever, ever gone forward with a lawsuit against a media source. Because the reality is, it's the job of the media to tell people about what's going on in government. We may not like the media at times, we may get frustrated with how they report things, but the reality is, without them, we can't have a democracy. And that's exactly the point as far as Republicans are concerned. So now we see that for the first time in nearly 60 years, the Supreme Court is considering taking up a case that would essentially get rid of this standard. And in fact, two of the Supreme Court justices, not surprisingly, Clarence Thomas, one of the leaders of the right wing, and Neil Gorsuch, one of Donald Trump's appointees, have both indicated that they believe we need to get rid of that standard. Why does the right wing want to get rid of this standard? Because then you don't have the free press available to report on what's actually going on in government. Silencing the free press is essential to authoritarian regimes. And given our traditions of freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and aggressive investigative reporting, if an authoritarian coup is to succeed in the United States, it needs to do something to silence it. As Donald Trump and his lackeys have discovered, simply attacking the press and trying to undermine its credibility is not enough. So now they're relying upon the Supreme Court that they have essentially built. A Supreme Court that, by the way, is historically unpopular, as I point out in a video that I'll link to up above here. A Supreme Court to essentially take away the protections which have allowed the free media here in the United States to be so successful. This is just one more attack on the democratic institutions that have kept the United States a beacon of freedom for the world, just as Republicans in so many states have been attacking people's right to vote. This should be something that's of concern to all democracy-loving Americans. And it's just one more example of how the Supreme Court has become nothing more than a political tool empowered by the Republicans to try to destroy democracy. Well, if you agree with me or disagree with me, I'd love to see your comments down below. And if you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, that'd be a huge help. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.